Hi, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today I'm reviewing Scape, a game by Praetorian Board Games and designed by Josh Horsley. Scape is going to be bringing you deck building combined with area control, a genre that I am absolutely certain must have been combined before, and yet I can't think of anything offhand that's done it. Now, it's going to be a classic deck builder in the sense you're going to start with your basic deck, you're going to be developing and building out your deck as you play. So perhaps I go ahead, I draw my cards, and along the way I'm going to be basically buying more cards to build up my deck while vying for area control across this board, building castles, erecting landscapes, and putting down my recruits in various areas to score for that majority as we close off the area. So perhaps maybe I go ahead over here, I'm going to go ahead and play a recruit, or well, first to play castles first, and we'll explain why shortly. I'm going to go ahead and place a castle wall over there, grabbing 2 castles and add them to the landscape. And in fact, because I'm black, I think I'd love to get in on this area over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and lock that off like so, putting those over there. You'll see why in a second. Then I'm going to go ahead and do recruit and lock down 2 recruits, one over here in case they want to close off that area, and then 1 inside. Now you can only build recruits on the ground. You could then build castles to shoot them up onto the ramparts, but castles must be played first every round. I have to wait till next round to play a castle underneath my people shooting them up. Then I'm going to go ahead and play a gold and a gold in order to get more gold and buy cards. Now you'll notice this gold over here, we have 2. We have the market stall, which gives me a gold, plain and simple. And then we have the clumsy thief, which I can choose to use or not to use, because if I do use the clumsy thief, well, that's going to give me some infamy in this game. I'm going to go ahead and after the round's over, I'm going to add it to my back alley cards, and when I cycle my deck, that's going to increase my infamy for each card in there that has either infamy or corruption. I'll be moving those tokens along accordingly, and that's something you're going to need to balance in this game. So I'm going to go ahead and spend my 2 gold, and in this case, I'm going to go ahead and buy, you know what, I'll go ahead and buy a craftsman's shop. That's going to get me a little more gold to be able to start building other combos in this game. We'll take those, put those into my discard pile, and I have my clumsy thief in my in my back alley over there. The other player is going to go ahead and take their turn and try to combat what I just did. Now let's go ahead and pretend they didn't take a turn, and I'll go ahead and take another turn with the remaining 5 cards I have. I'm going to go ahead and put my gold off to the side. I have 2 more market stalls. Actually, I have a 3rd market stall, as well as a clumsy thief. And now I'm going to play my stone walls over there, grabbing from the quarry again, and this time shooting them up underneath myself to raise me up, to give me more leeway there. So I'm going to go ahead and play that wall underneath here. Keep in mind, going 2 turns in a row without other players getting in the way, as I'm doing by showing you the game, is definitely not as easy as it would actually be in the game. And this other wall, I'll go ahead and start building out another area over here. So I'm going to go ahead and now score for this region, and we're going to see over here, each character in the region, each recruit in the castle scores for 1. Each recruit on the wall scores for 2. So in other words, for this little area over here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in black, and 1, 2, 3 in blue, meaning black's going to score the 3 points for that area over there, going up 1, 2, 3, and then going ahead and putting down one of their markers, scoring markers there, which means as we close off rounds, they're going to score additional points for control of that area. That's basically the area control game that you're playing. You're trying to slowly build out castles, build out walls, add recruits, and then the most important part, as in, well, any deck building game, building your deck to complement your strategy. Perhaps you go for more back alley bribes, adding more and more recruits onto the board, being able to put a ton of people on the board, but those back alley bribes comes at a cost because they're going to add to your infamy. And every round when you close off the round, you're going to be pulling people off the board based on how high your infamy is. So juggling the benefits cards give you with the infamy that they'll give you along the way, but giving you a benefit now but a cost you have to pay later, well, it's something you're going to want to manage in this game. Alternatively, we have the ramparts as well. The ramparts are going to give you tons of walls. Maybe that's the strategy you're going for. Control not so much of who's in the areas, but how you can close off those areas, how fast you can develop and build the areas that most suit your strategy. Perhaps you go ahead for the cards in this card row, because this game, like many deck building games, Scape is going to come with a fixed set of cards, of which you can utilize or buy cards from there for the consistency you might want, as well as a rotating market of different cards with different abilities that will augment your strategy in different ways. Draw a card, gain a gold, -1 infamy, and all guilds draw a card. All guilds are all other players, so you can slowly lower your infamy, but everyone gets a bonus along the way. Maybe mixed up orders where you can swap the locations of 2 different recruits. That can be very advantageous when you're trying to set yourself up both in a way that helps yourself, hurts an opponent, or maybe just messes with 2 opponents in a way that hurts 2 other opponents in a 3 or 4 player game. There's a lot of different pathways to victory, but then we're not done yet because, and by the way, I should note 2 things. 1, forgive my voice. I feel perfectly fine, but my voice sounds like this. And 2, this is a prototype review, so Both things are partially broken, I guess, my voice and the game. Not broken, broken's the wrong word, but neither here nor there. Going back to the game, so the other thing you have to manage over here is you're going to have goals and contracts. Now, goals are going to be a public set of goals, and again, prototypes, so art on many of the cards and the goals, not final. In fact, placeholder art on many of these things, but you're going to have things like the goal, don't be that guy. Gain 5 infamy when triggering the back alley cards during one turn. So if you go heavy on back alley cards, you might be able to get a chunk of points if you're able to get 5 infamy in one shot, which is hard, but if you build a deck that's that suited to the reward of the moment, you might be able to do it. We have first or bust. Claim a Bailey with 6 or more squares. So you're going to have these public goals that the first person to achieve that goal is going to get an additional chunk of points, giving you an additional thing to drive towards in this game, to drive towards in Castlescape. And then finally, you're going to have contracts. You're going to start the game with a set of contracts, but you additionally have the option to buy more contracts throughout the game by spending 5 money in the game and getting a new contract. That's an always available card, adding new contracts to your hand. And again, similar to the goals, they're going to give you something else to drive towards, some other aspect of the love of money. End the game with at least 4 craftsman shops in the game. Again, it's not so much something, the goals are going to be more in-game, accomplishing them and saying, hey, I got that. And the contracts are going to be more in-game cards, end-game cards, in the sense that you're going to have to achieve something in the way you constructed the deck and the way you built something out on the board. But both the contracts and the goals give you something else to work towards as you play this game. Lastly, the game is going to carry on for a variable number of rounds depending on the player count. A 2-player game will have 4 rounds, a 3-player game will have 3 rounds, 4-player game will have 3 rounds, with variable number of walls in them. So you're going to have this pile of walls. When you empty the walls, you're going to have a scoring round, then you're going to refill the quarry, rinse and repeat for 3 or 4 rounds, depending on the player count, and that is basically Castlescape. A few small nitpicks we haven't really gotten into, such as the aspect of how corruption works with Infamy, resetting your corruption in Infamy, small nitpicks like that, but this should be a fairly decent overview as to how this game plays out. And overall, Castlescape, to begin with, is a deck building game. I love deck building as a genre, I always have. I love the feeling of building a deck, of putting together a deck that works towards your strategy. Games that may not make me feel like I have the agency I want. The fact that I'm building a deck in the game already makes it more so. In fact, this is a good example over here. There are times where you're just going back and forth with the other player, putting down a wall, putting down a recruit, trying to counter the move they just made, going chess-like back and forth at each other. But the thing that makes me feel like I have more agency is not just the tactical strategy of this board, which there is, but also the fact that I'm building a deck. When things go my way, I often feel it's because I built the better deck, the more cohesive engine that works in my favor. I love deck building in general for that reason. Area control as well is generally a genre I like. Now, area control ranges in how messy it gets, and I would say Castlescape is fairly streamlined in the area control. There's not a ton of different things that mess with it. This is no El Grande where you're going to be heaping swarms of characters down in different regions and drastically manipulating the board. The movements in this game are going to be more small and measured, unless and until, of course, you have that one hand where everything works together perfectly and you put down 4 recruits and 4 walls in a single turn. Most of the time it's going to be small and measured, but it will come down to the efficiency of that deck you built and how you built it in order to achieve your goals. The goal cards, the contract cards, all those things are going to give you another way of driving strategy in the game. If you took those out, then every game of Castlescape would play out, well, mostly the same. Slightly different based on the rotating market, but I find it's the goals and contracts that really give me that feel of replayability, that aspect of, sure, I'm trying this strategy this game, I'm building my deck out this way this game, but hey, we have Don't Be That Guy. I can suddenly get a chunk of points if I go more Infamy this game. So perhaps I try a different strategy, something I didn't try last game, based on the way the goals and contracts come out in this game. The scoring in this game is fairly tight. Going back to that aspect of the board is fairly simple in what it's doing. The board is fairly simple. You're placing down your recruits. You're trying to slowly expand castles to get more points when you score them, but also putting down recruits and putting down walls in order to maximize your return is going to result in fairly tight scoring in the actual area control. Most of the time, you're going to come down to the contracts and the goals that are going to give you that extra degree of efficiency that you need to, well, to win the game. And lastly, the corruption. The corruption mechanic in this game is going to be something that I haven't seen done frequently. There are games that do something similar, but that aspect of taking a card that has a higher reward now, but a comeuppance later, does give you another degree of choice and strategy in Castlescape as you choose what kind of pathway to victory you think is most likely to succeed. As far as things I don't like in Castlescape, to begin with, the art and graphic design does not pull me in. Now, before I get into it, again, lots of things here are still very much in the prototype stage. I am not commenting on coming soon art or coming soon art here. Anything that is still prototype is not what I'm referring to. But I would just say in general, the box, the board, the cards that do have art in them, it's just not particularly pulling me in on a personal level. Now, don't get me wrong, some of my favorite games in my collection, I'm looking at Castle of Burgundy, Terraforming Mars, some of my favorite games do not have great art. But nonetheless, this is a game that, it's one that I initially dismissed when I first saw it because the art didn't pull me in. And it's only once I had a chance to play it that I saw past the art and more into the gameplay that's there. But it's certainly something that I am going to comment on as a personal negative as far as my own tastes. Additionally, and more importantly, I want more card variety in this game. The core deck over here, you're going to have the 5 basic placeholder cards, which are always in the market, but then additionally, you're going to have the rotating market of cards. The problem is, the game is streamlined enough that the cards mostly come down to small variations of getting extra money, recruits, or walls. There are going to be a handful of cards in the deck that do more interesting things like shifting around recruits, taking off opponents' recruits, moving people up onto walls, things like that. Those are the cards that I do want to see more of, but I also want to see more variety in what the cards bring to the table. The Castlescape delivers a fairly streamlined system, but for myself, I love the feeling of drafting a bunch of cards, not drafting, of building out a deck that utilizes a bunch of abilities that are fun and exciting and different. And building out your deck in this game is mostly coming down to those variations of the gold, recruits, and walls that best suit your strategy. So I want more variety, more interesting abilities across the deck. And then finally, I would say that I do want the game to often go on a bit longer. So far, I have found 2-player is my favorite player count because in a 2-player game, I feel I actually get to do a lot more done on the board. At 3 and 4 players, I have found that I feel like the game ends a little bit too early before I really have a chance to develop my deck. I'm still building things up, I'm still developing, I've gotten 1 or 2 goals, and then suddenly the game just crashes to a close a little earlier than I would otherwise want. So, as of right now, I find 2-player to be my personal favorite player count in this game. As far as I can see others not liking, the game can be fairly mean. It's one where you're going to constantly be getting in each other's faces and closing off their Baileys. You're going to have someone who thinks that they have something locked in, but through clever placement or manipulation, or perhaps one of the card abilities I mentioned, you suddenly steal the victory from someone else, something that someone else has built their walls, put down their recruits, invested time and energy into, and then it'll be snatched away from them. So that's something you want to be mindful of in this game. It is not a nice game of deck building and just doing your own thing. You are very much getting in each other's ways, especially in that 2-player game, which, like I said, is my favorite player count, but you're very much getting in each other's faces and taking things from one another because as you hurt someone else, you are inherently helping yourself in this game. And then lastly, luck of the draw. Luck of the draw will certainly be a factor of, especially because timing is so crucial in this game. When you play many deck building games, the fact that I got a good hand this turn or a good hand next turn doesn't really matter as much. They sometimes balance each other out to a degree. In Castlescape, because you're so often building out and closing off areas, if you get your good hand in a time that lets you close off and score a castle, whereas I don't, that can matter. So if luck of the draw is a thing that you don't like, well, then that might be a problem for you in Castlescape. Apologies for my voice again. As far as my final thoughts on Castlescape, this one's a 3 out of 5 for me. A 3 out of 5, my rating scale's down below. 3 out of 5 is a good game. Solid game, does not blow me out of the water, but is fun, is interesting, does bring good things to the table. I think Castlescape is a great Gateway Plus style game. It gives gameplay mechanics, area control, and deck building that are both solid gameplay mechanics. It combines them in a way that is satisfying in the game, and yet I also find myself wanting more from it, at least from my perspective of where I am in my gaming and what I look for in games. Castlescape delivers a lot of fun moments, a lot of fun aspects to it, from the contracts, the goals, the deck building, but I want more variety, and I want a longer game out of it. And I also wouldn't mind, like one thing I talked about with the designer is, I think the game would work better in a hex-based system. The game is built on a grid, which is good, it works, but it often means that these castle areas are smaller than I would like when you score them, because you're constantly fighting for space in each other's ways. As you try to get the castle space, you're also inherently closing off and making it smaller, so you spend time fighting over something that gets smaller and smaller as you fight over it. A hex-based system, because of the way hexes work in a grid, would allow for a little bit more leeway in that aspect, as well as a little more strategy in the way things expand in this game. Overall, Castlescape is a game that I do recommend checking out. It will be on Kickstarter either now or already, depending on when you watch this video. But check it out on Kickstarter. I'll throw a link down below. It's a solid game, Gateway Plus-ish, for me a 3 out of 5, but one that's worth looking into. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.